Hello and welcome to the Wealthy Grad Show. This is your host, Tony D'Angelo and Anthony D'Angelo, and we are honored and delighted to have the one, the only Robert Kiyosaki. Robert, welcome to the Wealthy Grad Show. Grateful you're with us today.
Well, thank you. We've been doing this for years, so thank you very much.
We have. This is about our sixth to seventh interview together. And every time you show up on the show, you continue to show the world this future that you predicted way back in 1997 with Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So tell us what's happened in the world today, Robert.
Well, I'm honored to be speaking to the wealthy grads, and if I could speak freely.
Absolutely.
All yours.
I want to say to the wealthy grads is you've been funked, period. I think you understand that language. And I'll explain why, but and why it was hard. I couldn't say that before. So like Tony and I are old enough that we did well. The graduates of today have been fucked. And that's why I started doing this work way back when. And if I could explain why you guys are fucked, it's because what did school teach you about money? Nothing. And what's really frightening when I look at young people and I go, holy mackerel. So when people say, what is financial education? Well, financial education is, it's also financial history. Okay, so in 1913, that's a very important year simply because that was a year the Federal Reserve Bank was created. Now, that same year, the Internal Revenue Service was created. Was that a coincidence? You know, if I was in school and I was teaching young people about financial education, I'd be talking about this date here. The Fed's created, which is not federal, it's not a bank, and it's not US. It's a cartel. It's like OPEC for money. But they don't tell you that. That upsets me. And the young people go, oh, the Federal Reserve Bank, Joe Powell, all these guys, they're ripping us off. But the same year was the IRS. The 16th Amendment was passed. Those are very, that made taxation possible. America in 1773 was a tax-free nation. It was called the Boston Tea Party. Look at history. America is a tax-free nation. So, but in 1913, the Fed is created. Again, it's a cartel. It's like OPEC for money. And, OPEC isn't really our friend. Okay? And then the Federal Reserve Bank. Then you look here at 1944. And the reason why I say it was easier for me to talk to, Tony, you, and my generation, because this was as World War II was ending. America, it was not yet the power it was. But in 1944 was the Bretton Woods Agreement, which made the US dollar the gold standard of the world. And so for myself, I'm a baby boomer. I was born 3 years later, 1947. The US economy boomed because the dollar was the reserve currency of the world. And in 1944, the US government promised the world we would back every dollar with gold. So America was, as I was born, and Tony came a few years after me, we were becoming the richest country in the world. So it was really easy. Anybody I was born in 1947, and it was easy. Anybody who's a baby boomer is not rich is a fucking idiot. They missed the biggest market move in history. You bought a house, I think my first house was $18,000. That same house is probably $400,000 today. That's all these guys are real estate flippers and the stock market went up and all that just because of this here. So then when I went to, in 1971, President Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. Now this is financial education. What did that mean? Well, in 1971, when Tricky Dick Nixon, he also opened the doors to China, and today Premier Xi and Putin are now our major enemies. So I opened the doors to China, but in 1971, Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. That means we could print as much money as we want. And so it got easier. You know, guys like my friends and I are billionaires today because we just use fake money. It's so easy to get, it was so easy for boomers to get rich. So when I speak to your son, that generation, you guys got fucked. Because of these three dates here, America went from being the richest country in the world to the biggest debtor nation in world history. And so when I speak to, you know, young people graduating, let's say in 2020, you're fucked. You have student loan debt that's going to crush you. The U.S. Treasury, I think, we're 30 trillion in debt. If you printed $1 an hour, you know how long it would take to print $1 trillion? I think 32,000 years. But they print $1 trillion in a split second just because of these two dates here. So the young graduates, I mean, I hate to use the F word, but I think it communicates better than I think you're in trouble. You know,
You tell the truth here, Robert. Absolutely.
Yeah, and my generation, the boomer generation, or the World War II generation, really screwed the graduates of today. And that's what concerns me. And that's what real financial education is you have to know the history of money also. And that's why there's no financial education in schools. And so young people come out, I don't know, I've never seen such huge student loan debt. I mean, you know,
It's over $40,000 a year now, Robert. The average college student now will graduate with 40 grand.
And I don't know if they're making those high-paying jobs, but
No.
if you are, but the mass of the young people cannot. And this is what else is terrible is my friends, as you know, most of my friends, their kids don't have student loan debt because they come from rich families. Right? So, but if you come from a lower middle class family, you're the one coming out with the debt. Do I make sense here?
Absolutely.
So
Yes.
that's why the fucking school system is criminal right now. You should be teaching kids about money. That's what pisses me off. And Tony, how many years have you known me? I get really hot and bothered and upset about it simply because why don't they have financial education in school? Why
Amen,
don't
Robert.
the truth?
I've never learned any of this. This is the first time hearing any of those three numbers.
What's that?
This is the first time ever hearing any of those three
Dates.
numbers in my life.
It's interesting, isn't it? They don't ever tell you that stuff. So that's why, you know, Tony, D'Angelo, what you're doing is important. But you're going against, you and I, we're all going against the entire system. The Federal Reserve Bank, again, is not federal. It's private, not a bank. It's a cartel. It's like OPEC. And the Treasury, they manipulate the Treasury. And the thing I'm really quite disturbed about is I went to military school in 1965, went to school in New York, Kings Point. And so I got a military education. And I see young people coming out today, they're going to universities and coming out snowflakes. I've never seen such weak men and women. You know, oh, you hurt my feelings. You got critical race theory. You got gender pronouns. I mean, give me a break. Why don't they teach us these three dates here? Just teach these three dates. You know, I'm not, I've been called a racist and a white supremacist. I thought that was going to right.
I'm glad we're doing this on video, Robert, so everybody can see clearly you're not a white guy, huh?
But you know, it was good being born Asian because I only had to work harder.
Mm.
If you know what I
Can
mean.
you say that again, Robert? I think that is profound what you just said.
Well, I went to a rich kid's school by accident, you know, in Hilo, Hawaii. I just before the districts fell, I went to a rich kid's school. It was Riverside School, directly across the street. Like if this here is the street, one school was on this side, one school was on this side. So the rich kids went to Riverside School, and my father was head of, that's my father back there,
Mm-hmm.
Asian, poor dad. And he didn't manipulate it. I just happened to go to a rich kid's school. And so you're rich when your classmates are in the country club having lunch, and I'm in the caddy shack having lunch.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of get the picture. They belong to the country club and the yacht club, and I don't. They have nice bicycles, and I don't. So when I was 9 years old, I asked my teacher, because I'd never been around rich kids. They're all white too. And I said, how come they're rich and we're not? And I went back to my dad, and my dad said, well, just stay in school.
Hmm.
I said, Dad, you stayed in school. You're not rich. So, Tony, that's where the road divided. I knew I was being sold a bill of goods by the school system, by my poor dad. And that's when I met Rich Dad's son, because he was like me, a poor kid. He was Chinese. We're both kids in Hilo, Hawaii, the farthest city south in the all United States, the deep south, 19.5 north latitude.
Hmm.
And so Rich Kid's son and me, Mike, we realized we're fucked. Our friends are all rich, and we're poor. And so I go to my poor dad. He says, get your PhD. I said, Dad, you have a PhD. You're still poor. And then I go talk to a rich dad, who was Rich Dad's son, and he says, you can't do it the way your dad did it. School will never teach you about money. So that's why, Tony, you and I have been on the warpath for years. Why don't we teach money at school? Why are young people coming out with extreme student loan debt? Why are jobs being exported? The reason 1972 was so important, that's when Nixon opened the doors to China.
Hmm.
And our jobs were exported out of this country. And then in 71, it takes $1 off the gold standard. But they never tell you this. So today, the younger kids get poorer and poorer. You happen to go to Harvard or Princeton or Yale, good. But the average kid's not. I mean, I was a C student. I was never going to get a good school. So I look at what's happening to your son's age now. I go, you're fucked. We fucked you. Because in 1944, we were the richest country in the world. And then Nixon fucked us. But the schools will never teach you that. And they printed trillions of dollars, and now America's the biggest debtor nation in the world. Went from the richest country in the world to the biggest debtor nation in the world. Why don't they teach that to our kids?
Well, and I think that's the significance, Robert. If you actually, what's really prophetic here is your father's in this picture. So we literally have 4 generations. We have Ralph, Robert, and I'm a Gen Xer, and Anthony, he's a Gen Z. And so I think it's very prophetic, this idea that it's when the next generation says, all right, enough of the bull crap, enough of the bullshit. You are fucked. And now what are we going to do about it? And one of the things that I have to say that I've always said to you, I know your father was the superintendent of the state of Hawaii of education, and you've become, for me and many, the global superintendent of financial education for humanity. I mean, you really have done that. And case in point, your other student in the room outside of me, that next generation, I can't help the college kids, because if their parents and their families won't fight for it, well, like you said, Robert, they fuck themselves. But this idea that you dropped in my head way back before I even had a child was, why don't we teach money in school? And I'm like, great, I'll change the system. And guess what? The system won't change, parents. You got to be the change. And so at the age 5, Anthony started playing the cash flow game. He started playing with the mice and the cheese before anything, and the pictures and all those stories. So Anthony, what was your first exposure with Mr. Kiyosaki and Rich Dad Poor Dad? Do you remember?
First, it was kind of just like, here's this book. Kind of what you've been saying, like they don't teach this in school. Everything you just said, I don't think I've ever heard. I know the quadratic formula. I know how to add and combine rational fractions, this and that, but they can't show us one single thing you just told me in the 20 minutes we've been talking, which is just like sad after 16 years in school. Literally not one thing you said was repeated ever. Even in business classes, like intro to business, never, I didn't know when the gold standard with the dollar, I'd never heard that in my life.
So what's one thing, Anthony, that you've learned from the teaching of not only Mr. Kiyosaki, but Rich Dad and the whole financial literacy movement that Mr. Kiyosaki's pioneered?
That the rich don't work for money. Like you have to, you can work to learn, but working for money is a poor person's mindset. It's not a wealthy person or a rich person's mindset whatsoever. Because
And Robert, I think one of the interesting components that I've watched is you would then tell millennials and also Gen Z, like, listen, boys and girls, this is what changes the world. You'd always hold your phone up. And I can remember showing Anthony a video of you talking about this. And he had some shitty, crappy iPhone that was a cracked screen. And he began to start his own business with his iPhone. And so while those who refuse to get financially educated are fucked, those who are following your teachings, I think there is, and I know you hate this word, there's hope, but there's possibility because you're taking your destiny in your own hands. Can you speak to that, Robert? Like what's good about all this crap in the world?
Yeah, what Anthony is saying about the rich don't work for money is because in 1971, it stopped being money. But it actually started up here in 1913.
Tell us more.
And so what happens is the people that work for money pay the taxes. If you understand that one. So the more you work for money, the more tax you pay. Whereas I work for assets. And that was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. The rich don't save money. Why would you save money when I think they printed 8 trillion this year or something?
Yeah. Unbelievable.
Why would you save it? And this is really strange, Tony. I was reading The Economist just now. There is so much cash floating around right now. The savings rate of America is all-time high, and so is poverty. And the reason is people are saving fake money here. This fake money wouldn't have been possible without 1913. But they don't teach you that. And then taxes are going up. So, and then when Biden shut down the XL pipeline, when you do that, I own oil wells. Because what Tony just said is, I don't work for money, I work for oil wells. I work for books, I work for businesses, I work for real estate, I work for assets. I don't have a job working on the oil well. So I own oil wells. And because I own oil wells, when Biden took the XL pipeline offline, I got richer because the price of oil went up. But who else got richer was a guy named Putin. Putin was one of the biggest oil distributors in the world. So Biden is working for Putin. And Putin just today is pounding Ukraine as we talk.
And what happened to the price of oil today, Robert? Did it go up or down?
It's going for the roof. So is gold. But when oil goes up and gold goes up, it means the dollar is coming down. What it does then, it sends out young people like Tony, Anthony, and you go and work harder, you go to a higher paying job, which pushes you into a higher tax bracket.
You getting this, Anthony? Straight from the man. What did Robert just say? What did you hear?
Everything keeps going up. So if you want to go get that new job and your paycheck keeps going up, you're going to be pushed into a new higher tax bracket, which just pretty much means you're going to be paying more taxes on the money that keeps going down. So your money is just losing money at this point.
And
Robert, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It started here. 1913 was the Federal Reserve Bank. It also was the Internal Revenue Service. And today, because of this here, America is the biggest debtor nation in the world. So if they raise interest rates, it's going to make America bankrupt because we can't pay the debt. Think about $30 trillion in debt. At 1%, I don't know what that is, but it goes to 5%, 30 trillion at 5%. It's a lot different than 30 trillion at 1%. So I don't, Tony, I flunked out of math, all this, I'm horrible at math. I just know we're fucked. That's my scientific term.
Right.
You have 30 trillion in debt, and it goes from 1% interest to 5%. America's bankrupt. That's what happens because that money's got to come from the taxpayer.
Well, and Robert, this is reminiscent. I remember sitting in your boardroom. My wife and I were there. It was 2008. And you were talking about you had predicted the real estate collapse and the great financial reset great financial crisis, excuse me, of 2007, 8, 9. And you were explaining to everybody who at that time, you were saying your value of your property did not go up. The purchasing power of the US dollar is going down. And that was a game-changing idea for me. Just like when you talk about 1913, 1944, 1971, that idea that the more that they print, the value, the purchasing power of the dollar continues to go down. So prices may go up, but the value goes down.
And that's what it's so. I mean, Anthony, it's fucked up. It is so fucked. 30 trillion in debt. And guess what? My generation sitting to retire right now, baby boomers, got this thing called a 401k. The bond market's coming apart. And if the stock market crashes, you're going to have, 65 million baby boomers with a 401k that they can't afford to retire on. So they're going to have to bail the boomers out too. The other book I just wrote was called Who Stole My Pension? Is that teachers' pension, police officers' pensions, and firefighters' pensions are bankrupt because it was stolen by Wall Street. And so it's called Who Stole My Pension? If you have any friends or family on a government pension, Who Stole My Pension is your book, because my co-author is a guy who is the biggest whistleblower in America on pensions. He sued United Airlines and all those guys to pay off FedEx, UPS. I mean, this guy is going after those pensions because Wall Street is stealing the crap out of people with pensions. So the biggest bill of all hasn't hit yet. It's called pensions, Social Security, and Medicare as the boomers retire.
So Anthony, what Mr. Kiyosaki is saying is we got to get a bigger house for grandma, grandpa, your four grandparents.
Sounds like it. Sounds like it.
So
Sounds
Robert, what would we know Rich Dad, Poor Dad, we know the Who Stole My Pension, but I really want to get into your book. I'm excited about getting Anthony into my head into, and that's Capitalist Manifesto. I mean, thank freaking God you keep putting this stuff out there. Can you speak to Capitalist Manifesto and what this is all really about, Robert?
Sure. Capitalist Manifesto is about education. So it started in 1965. This is called the Communist Manifesto. This book was written in 1848. Everybody should read it because it was talking about today. Everything this book wrote about is coming true today. So in 1965, I'm a stupid kid going from Hilo, Hawaii to New York. And my economics teacher, instead of having us read Keynes and all those guys, had us read Communist Manifesto, Das Kapital, and Mao's little book. Because it was a military school, one of the 5 federal academies like West Point and Naval Academy, he says you've got to know your enemy. And your enemy are communists. But our schools never teach kids communism. So at 18 years old, I'm reading this book. So that's why in 2022, this book comes out. It's called the Capitalist Manifesto. And it's really about how you fight back against this. But it's really tragic. Today is the day Putin invaded the Ukraine. If you've ever seen the damage that bullets and bombs do to the body, it's not funny. But the concussions and all that, it's horrifying. But the only reason that's happening is because Biden is a communist. Now, I'm not a communist, a senator, I'm a president. But he opened up the southern border. At 2 million, I'm not against Mexicans or anything, but most of the people coming from the southern border aren't near the northern border, they're from the deep south. They want the poorest of the poor invading America so that they can change the demographics of America. At the same time, they start with gender and race discriminations. They says the next Supreme Court justice must be a woman and she must be black. Well, that's racist. What about qualified? One of the most qualified person. I realize it is racist. But everything that Biden is doing, this guy wrote about. If you understand that, and then Kamala Harris is supposed to be the czar of the southern border. She's never been to the southern border. They're fighting for the border of the Ukraine. What the hell is this? And because we don't know anything about this book here, I had to write this book. Because what this book will show you is how America became communist in 2020 and how we can battle back against it. I'm not optimistic. But Tony, what you're doing with teaching financial education to college kids is probably the most important thing to do because you can arm their brains. If you can give your brain power to fight back as a capitalist, you have a chance. The difference between a socialist and a capitalist is a socialist believes you should give people money. A capitalist believes you should teach people about money.
Can you say that again, Robert, for our listeners? That's so powerful, so important.
A socialist believes you should give people money, as you give a man a fish, or you teach a man to fish, or a woman. And when you give people fish, that's what they gave to my generation. We have Social Security, we have Medicare, we have 401ks. We had it so easy. But it's your son's generation that's going to pay for it. And we're bankrupt. That's why I started with an F word, as you guys are fucked. My generation fucked you, but it's really the World War II generation that fucked you.
Well, for all the fucking up your generation did, Robert, the one thing they did do right is produce a financial educator like you, because that was one of the lessons. I remember when Anthony was born, I'm like, I'm not giving you an allowance. I'm not going to give you fish, kid. I'm going to teach you how to fish. And I want to give you and your generation some credit there, because while you didn't cause that, I mean, you didn't make those decisions in 1913. You weren't alive. 1944, your generation was born. It's now, okay, now what are we going to do 50 years later, 51 years later after 1971? So what is some of that? What would you, that open-minded parent or child or educator out there who does see that, okay, this other way of being is just not working. Like, we've created a monster. What advice would you give? Not advice, because I know you don't give advice, but aside from being fucked, what would you tell them straight up to do right now? What would you tell if you were Anthony at 17, Robert, what would you tell them here in 2022?
Well, that's what you're doing, Tony. You know, I wrote this book here. The first thing that happened was 1996, create the cash flow board game.
Right here.
Why did I create a board game?
Monopoly on steroids.
To get kids playing it and in their hands and in their minds.
Yes.
Young.
Exactly, Anthony. What Maria Montessori, another great educational entrepreneur, what she said, what the hand does, the mind remembers.
Mm.
Saying another way is, can you learn to play golf without a golf club?
No.
But that's what our schools are trying to do, is they're trying to teach you to play golf without a golf club. Just memorize it. Memorize the right answer. But you can't do a damn thing. And the problem I have with many college professors, like my poor dad, they think if you have the answers, that's all you need. But they can't do anything. So when I read this book, again, I leave my father, I go to New York, I read this book here. Marx and my father and most PhDs and most socialists are the same people. They're very smart, most of them are good people. It's 80% are good people. Very smart, but what frustrates them, they can't do anything. You see, they used to see my poor dad would see my rich dad just make money hand over fist. But they can't do it because they have the answer, but they cannot do the work. And so that's why that's where the cash flow board game was created. So you actually have to fill out financial statements. As I always said, your bankers never ask you for your report card. The banker doesn't care about your grade point average. Your banker wants to see a financial statement. So last week, Kenny McElroy, who we borrowed $340 million. My poor dad couldn't borrow $30, much less $340 million. but we can borrow 340 million because we have financial statements. We know how to take debt and turn it into money, which is this here. One of the greatest skills I had to learn with this and this here is how do you take debt and turn it into an asset? How do you turn it into cash flow? So that's all part of the Capitalist Manifesto. And that's why this book came out. This is coming out right now as we speak, because this book is part of it. So is the cash flow board game. So the thing I'm happy about, Tony, is you've been teaching this stuff for years. But this book kind of explains more from the macroeconomic side. But the solution is, if you understand capitalism, if you understand what capitalists do, you're not a victim to communism.
So the greatest way to do is to teach kids to be more capitalist.
Correct. And the great thing about a game is, another biblical principle is give, teach, and you shall receive, and give, and you shall receive. So the people that teach the cash flow game, they learn just as much.
And Robert, how many cash flow clubs are there now worldwide? Do you know a track on that number?
Thousands. So we're changing the world. Each game is people teaching people.
Yeah.
But as you know, Tony, as the school system and New York Times come after us because they're communists. It's not bad people, don't get me wrong. I support freedom. You're free to be a communist, you can free to be a fascist, you can free to be a Christian, you can free to be a Jew, Muslim, Buddhist. But the trouble is, after 65, when I read this book, I realized my family are communists. Not bad people, but they're really socialists. They want to give people fish. They don't teach you fish, because you know what? They don't know how to fish.
Right. Well, and then they can keep you dependent upon them. And I think, and that's one of the unique things. So one of the things that inspired me is one of the very first cash flow clubs that I saw happening in the US higher ed space years ago was at Stanford. Matter of fact, I had a group of kids from Stanford reach out to me. And again, look at Stanford. Those are entrepreneurial minded kids going to school. And I'm like, wait, if they're doing it at Stanford, why aren't we doing this at all the other 4,000 colleges? And so that is really the mission. What we're here to do is to get students to get a game on campus, get students to play independent of your teacher, your professor, the provost, the academic curriculum. As you've always said, Robert, students teaching students, people teaching people. Because as you teach it, the more financially free you become.
Yeah, but you shall receive. It's all biblical. But also, it's amazing. Before we went on air, this book just comes out. The Navy SEALs call me because this book's about military training. I used to go to military school. I flew for the Marine Corps, killed a lot of people. But once you kill a person, your life changes. It's not what you think it is. So the Navy SEALs call me, and I speak to them. And then I spoke to the Defense Intelligence Agency in Washington, D.C. The DIA are the hitmen of the military, the snipers. They're a different breed of cat. But I'm at home with them because that's my background, military school and Marine Corps. But who else called me was Arizona State University, which is the largest university in America. And my whole faith in education has been new because these teachers want me to teach their kids about money. So this changing, it's slowly changing. And then Prager University, I was in Los Angeles yesterday, talking to the commencement class, mental exercise at Prager University. So things are changing. But that's why I use such vulgar language, like speaking to Anthony. You're fucked. You've got to do something different. You can't just go out there and get a job and save money and buy a house and get out of debt and buy a 401k. And that's not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is the wealth gap between rich and poor. You look at the, I made billionaire. My best friend made billionaire. Another friend made billionaire. And other kids are working for $50,000 a year or something. You're not going to get there with the taxes are eating. So that's why what you're teaching, via Rich Dad at this book here and the cash flow board game, is kids understand assets versus liabilities. So I only work for assets. I'm very happy. I just bought the biggest gold mine in the world last week.
Congratulations.
Yeah, but I do it with debt.
Hmm.
So when guys like Dave Ramsey, who's a friend of mine, says live debt free, well, that's good for him. That's good advice for most people. But on the other side of the coin, all coins have three sides: heads, tails, and edge of the coin. So on one side of the coin, most people without financial education should live debt free. But what you're teaching them, Tony, to be at the cash flow game in your books, is if you can take debt, because that's what happened here. In 1971, the dollar became debt. If you can take debt and turn it into an asset and turn the asset into cash flow, that's the game of capitalism. But they don't tell you that in school because most school teachers, they're good people, but they think like Marx, and they're academic intellectuals. They're good people. Marx was very concerned because capitalism was leaving the poor behind. So his answer, Marx's answer, was revolution. And what I'm concerned about now, when Biden shut down the XL pipeline and inflation goes up, I got richer. Thank you, Joe Biden. He made Putin richer. Putin should be kissing Biden's feet. But higher oil prices makes life harder on the poor and the middle class. And homelessness is going to go up because fentanyl is pouring across our southern border from China. But they don't talk about that. They talk about critical race theory and gender pronouns and what else they're talking about. But this is why this book is finally coming out in 2020. It took me 3 years to write it. But
it's the perfect timing, Robert. Perfect timing.
I think they need it. I think you should ship it over to some other people.
Anthony, what's something you took away from this conversation with Mr. Kiyosaki? What would you share with your generation outside of that you're fucked, or inside of that? What else would you agree with what Mr. Kiyosaki is saying, and what would you tell your generation?
1,000%. I would say that first I would talk about those 3 years because I guarantee you no one's ever heard of those, sadly. And second, just keep school. School is great for some people, but I think if you want to be successful nowadays, you need to hop on a different track because obviously, as you're saying, a lot of people are getting on those 401ks and different things of that nature. And now they're going to have to go back to work or they're going to have to find a new plan because those things aren't there anymore for those people. So I think people just need to adjust to reality instead of living in the past.
Yeah, and another thing that happened, it was all around my generation's time, Anthony. So 71 was to put the dollar off the gold standard. But what else it did was in 74, the 401k came out. Yeah. And they don't know if it's going to work. So
Robert, you wrote about that in Rich Dad's Prophecy, like in 2000 that came out? 2002? You were talking about the implosion of the 401k back with Rich Dad's Prophecy. And again, if you haven't read that book, it truly is prophetic because Robert predicted back then what we're experiencing right now. So
what Anthony's talking about is my generation is sitting here with this 401k, thinking they're fat, dumb, and happy. But meanwhile, we're the biggest debtor nation in the world. Yeah. And that's at 30 trillion. If interest rates go from, let's say, 1% to 5%, I'm not good at math. America's bankrupt. The 401k comes down. And so you're going to have my generation of boomers, they're fucked too. So that's why what your father is teaching is crucial. Let me say a couple more things that gives people some hope here. What I cover in this book and in Rich Dad Poor Dad is covered in the second book here. This here is the cash flow quadrant. And our schools say, go to school, get a job, or become a specialist. Like these are the smart guys, these are doctors, lawyers, accountants, attorneys. Marx writes about these guys.
Mm.
It's really interesting. In Communist Manifesto, he does a whole section on how these guys got fucked. But he doesn't say how, this book was 1848, so it's a long time. But this is how they got fucked, because it goes back to this year, 1913, okay? How they got fucked is very simply employees pay 40% in taxes. I don't know if you can see that, but 40%.
Yes, 40%.
They asked like a doctor, the smart guys, the medical doctors, they pay 60% in taxes.
Mm.
Again, that goes back to 1913. So that means my friend, I'm going to have dinner with him tonight. He makes about $1 million a year. Well, the math isn't that hard. You make $1 million a year, taxes are 60%. How much are his taxes?
600,000.
Yeah. And
It's a lot of money. It's more than half of his income being taken by the government.
Yeah. Because
he's a sole proprietor instead of a entrepreneur.
And Anthony, what's funny is Marx wrote about it in 1848. I'm kind of a sick comedian here. But
it's true. That's what's it's sad, funny, yet true.
The truth hurts. The truth hurts.
Yeah, but like on the capitalist side, so this is kind of a working class, the proletariat side. But on the capitalist side, which is another class of people, these guys pay 20% in taxes. The reason for that is they provide jobs that produce assets. So, in certain way, the most I'll ever pay is 20%. But as an inside investor, the reason I can buy the gold mine and all this stuff is my taxes are 0%. So let me give you a specific example. Okay? So when Biden took off the XL pipeline, it made me richer because the price of oil went up. But also, if you invest in oil, you get higher tax breaks. I just bought my own Learjet. I got tax breaks. But if you're an employee, you don't get those tax breaks. If you're a doctor, you don't get those tax breaks. So it's a matter of financial education. Again, 1913, they're all real, there's a synchronicity. They're operating in harmony, whatever it is. But that's what I cover here at Capitalist Manifesto. And the book ends actually in 2020 with how America became a communist nation when we have censorship. And also President Trump's a friend of mine. We wrote 2 books together. But we're really as real estate guys, not as politicians. So when the president of the United States gets censored, that's communism. So you may hate him, I understand that. But what right does Silicon Valley have to censor him? And now they're taking guns away, which is Second Amendment, freedom of own arms. And they're going to stack the Supreme Court. And so when Biden says you must appoint a black woman to the Supreme Court, well, that's racial prejudice. What if there's a white woman who's just as qualified, better qualified? What if it was a Japanese woman? So we've become so racist and so prejudiced. It's saddening. So that's why this book here ends in 2020. It's a year America became communist. And if you follow this book here, he wrote about it. He wrote about this book. He says communism will hit America in 2 stages. Stage 1 is socialism. Stage 2, communism. Stage 2 happened in 2020. The censorship, president taken down, and all that. And I know you guys hate. A lot of people hate Trump. Understandable. That's politics.
It would be the same if we took somebody, and Robert, just because we don't agree with your political views, we shut your power off at your home. It's the same concept. And why we do that with each other and to each other is a great wake-up call. And again, I think that's what your work has always done. When I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I said, oh, that book, it woke me up. It got me to be awake. And then when I read Cash Flow Quadrant, it ripped my eyelids off. And I've never closed them since. And you continue to not only empower me as a father for that next generation, but now we're getting right to the core of this next generation. And I applaud you for the courage and conviction. I mean, Robert, let's face it, you could have retired at any time and tapped out of this game, but you clearly, as Emerson would say, who you are shouts so loudly, I do not hear a word you say. because you're just passionate for the mission of advancing, educate the well-being of humanity, the financial well-being of humanity. Is just, it's a great thing. Hey, we're coming to the end of the show. You, as always, inspire me. Cannot wait to get my hands on a copy of Communist Manifesto. Listeners, got to go to richdad.com, pre-order the copy. As soon as the paper mills start running again, we'll all have it in our hands, which I cannot wait. Closing thoughts, Anthony, why don't you go? And then Robert, if you can close us out. But Anthony, your final thoughts for wealthy grads, and what was your wisdom takeaway from Mr. Kiyosaki?
First, we're all fucked. So that kind of sucks. But you can't blame our age. You got to blame the older guys. But just keep your head up and keep remembering to be an entrepreneur and to not work for money, not work for time, work for results. It's a results-based economy now. So it's not a, well, I worked 20 hours. I deserve to get this. You don't deserve anything now. So got to be a hard worker and
study capitalism.
Say that again,
Study
Robert.
Capitalism.
Study capitalism.
Because Anthony, that's what when I was 9 years old, I go to all white school, all rich kids. I said the same thing. I'm fucked. What? That inspired me. You know what I mean?
Most definitely.
So use it as inspiration. Don't be a victim like Black Lives Matter wants to teach you. You're not a victim. You can do something about it.
Always a solution to the problem.
Yeah. And you guys have this thing called the iPhone. That's the most powerful tool I've ever seen. But you can use it to get rich. You can use it to get stupid.
Robert, before Anthony went to school today, I woke up early this morning and there's a box of, he has a sneaker reselling business, and he had 6 boxes going to get shipped out to some place. I don't know, all places across the US, all in a simple iPhone. Yeah. And it's remarkable. So you've inspired me to have that conversation with him, saying, all right, let's start the business. Let's go, buddy.
Good for you, Anthony. Always remember, do it legal, ethical, moral, be a kind.
That's what I stand by. Because I've had some offers in the past, and I always say, gotta stay ethical.
Good for you.
Well, Robert, this is a real joy. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much for giving us your time.
Such an inspiration, Robert.
Well, thank you. What you do. It's exciting times. Thank you.
It is. Thank you.
Thank you so much.